Welcome back to Northwest Elite Spirit, the channel you come to train your mind, body, and spirit. I'm Coach Brian. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do that now and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of my newest releases. I share content on training the mind, body, and spirit, so there's always something coming at you and it's all tied together in the end. This is saving time and energy from Encounters with the Nagual, Conversations with Carlos Castaneda by Armando Torres. Before we get started, let me just say that I am no master. I am no guru. I am a student learning these things just like you and sharing the lessons as I learn them and sharing my thoughts and ideas and results of my practice. From the outset, Carlos is talking about how the universe is almost entirely feminine, with the masculine energy being rare, and that for the masculine energy, or the light, feminine is the dark, masculine is the light. For the light, the feminine contracts and allows the light through. Later on in the chapter, Carlos goes into how the amount of passion or energy that people have when they birth kids will determine how much passion and energy a child has. And I think that ties together with the feminine and masculine energy of the universe and us as individuals, in that the amount of passion and energy that you put into a creation will determine the success and the ferocity and the power of whatever comes out of that creative process. Carlos quotes, show me who you hang out with and I'll show you who you are. Carlos talks about how we are all so opinionated and how that keeps us locked into tradition and societal norms, being that our opinions are rarely, if ever, our own. It's normally based on who we're around, traditions and societal expectations. And you may say, not me, because I'm opposed to tradition and societal expectations. For a long time, I was too. I lived my life directly opposed to traditions and societal expectations and even familial tendencies. And though this did me good for a while, because I grew up among alcohol abuse, drug abuse, physical, mental, and sexual abuse, in the end, what really changed my life was not to be in opposition of those things, but to just live freely, entirely free of them. Rather, because when you're directly opposed, you're still tangled up in those knots and you're still tied to those things. And when you begin to free yourself and not be tangled up in those things at all is when you practice true freedom. As an example, he goes on to tell stories of people who were given last names based on descriptions of their physicality or personality, and how not only that label affects that person's lives, but how we as humans took those last names that were given because of physical traits or mental traits, and those were passed on to, that last name was passed on to their children and the generations, demonstrating how our perceptions and how our opinions can be forced on to people and adhered to strictly throughout generations. He goes on to say that we even do this with our emotions, our feelings, and our thoughts. We try to put them in a box. We try to label them. And this stagnates and traps our emotions rather than allowing them to manifest freely and organically and develop in a way that will give us a true perception. Not a label, but a true perception of those feelings, those emotions, those thoughts. Carlos goes into another example of how we do this by traditions, by these holidays that we celebrate. Uh, Christmas, Mother's Day, All Saints Day, Thanksgiving, all of these things. And I'm going to give you an example of the traps that we find that we fall into for this from my own life. I began collecting dragons when I was younger. But it was like only like cool dragons, posters, statues, things like this. But then the people around me, knowing that I collected dragons, started giving me just all kinds of dragons and not necessarily cool ones. And like, I remember somebody brought me like 6 small dragon statues from the dollar store. And then somebody else, it was for my birthday. That same birthday, someone got me like dragon underwear. And somebody got me like a dragon pen set with like but it was plastic and it had like an envelope opener. And I was young. I wasn't opening envelopes with envelope openers. And it was like a lot of cheap stuff. And I actually got upset because that's all anybody got me. Nothing that anybody got me was useful, and these things weren't cool. And I was labeled ungrateful and unthankful for all of these cheap dragons that people got me based on, their perception of what I wanted. Like, it seemed even like, I was like, man, what did you go do? Like, you just went through and like cleared the shelf of dollar store dragons into your cart, and that's what you brought me, and now I'm stuck with all these crappy dragons. And then, so also, I like holidays a lot, and I know a lot of us don't. And Carlos kind of explains why, and it hits dead on with my life. Everybody it was like the same songs. You'd go to somebody's house to celebrate, and it'd be like the same prayer. There'd be no feeling behind the prayer. The same, conversations, the same food, just the same thing every year, same time of day. Everybody would eat just on this pattern every year, and there's no emotion in the holiday. And so I began to not like Christmas. But how I took that back was I started doing my own thing on Christmas, and people could come over or they could not, and I would not cook traditional things. I would not play traditional songs. We would not have traditional conversation, and I would not give traditional gifts. And this gave the holiday of Christmas a new life and a new spark for me. And then I was able, again, having expanded my perception, I was able to take that practice into other holidays, and then not just holidays, into other things, and begin to operate outside the confines of what everybody else was doing. And this would upset people. Doing something different on Christmas or Mother's Day or your birthday or whatever day will upset people around you if they're not open to that. And so but if you do it anyway, it'll open you up to having a greater time, and even meeting other people who are into expanding their own personal awareness and experiencing these holidays outside of the norm. And Carlos demonstrates how holdfast people can be to these traditions, in that him and Don Juan went and sat on a bench in a town square in Mexico, and these 12 young boys brought in a puppet of Judas the betrayer, the story of Christ. And they set him up in the Times Square, or in the town square. And later on that night, they came back and drank and began to insult Judas. And the town and everybody around them took part. And Carlos talks about how we keep these energies alive through these traditions, and how they keep Judas alive and in hell through these traditions, in that they kill him every year and they resurrect him every year in order to just kill him again. Carlos talks about how we keep just not that example, but other examples in our life alive and keep this energy flowing through what's called the collective fixation of the assemblage point. And it is a fixation because we are fixed, we are held fast, we are tied around the neck to these stakes of tradition, of societal expectations, and our opinions that we build around those things. And he goes on to talk about how it's unfortunate that we have built our perception and even our self-perception around the opinions, ideologies, and traditions of other people. And if we begin to break outside of that, that is where our true freedom lies. And Carlos talks about, the lesson from Don Juan, where when we tell stories of what we've done, who we are, or what we will do, often stories about what we want people to think about us rather than who we truly are, this puts us up against a wall. This builds a framework around us, and people begin to see us as this solid fact, this thing that we are. Brian is this. Coach Brian is this. So-and-so is this. And this traps us and keeps our energy from flowing freely. Carlos says that talking about us makes us accessible and weak, because not only does it cause people to put you in a box, but like me, when I used to oppose everything, that could be used against me. Someone could propose something to me in this box, knowing that they really want to get me in this box, and all they would have to do was say do this, and I would do the opposite. And that had some devastating effects on my life overall that I'm still recuperating from, that I'm still untangling from. And a lot of advice about how to be successful goes into this, being solitude, going into solitude, being alone. And Carlos is suggesting that if you want to break away from these traditions, get out of your box, get out of your matrix, is that you have to go away from everyone who knows you well and begin to build from there. And this will free up your mind and free up your actions to be able to experiment a little more and see a little more, see outside of that matrix, and that way you gain more personal power. And Carlos says it's our task as sorcerers to break free from societal perception. So to break free of what everyone around you is seeing or doing. I just had another thought that my daughter talks about. When you come to a crosswalk and there's a group of you, and this is something that happened to her more than once. You come to a crosswalk with a group of people and there are no cars from either direction, but it says don't walk. And she walks, and the people around her get anxious and even mad at her, and they stay. But not only do they stay, but once she gets across the street, she's making her way to where she's going. They want her to stop and wait for them while they wait for the stoplight when there are no cars coming. And I guess that, to me, that's a perfect example of societal expectations attempting to hold you fast to where you're at. Carlos talks about how when you begin to do this, you can see time differently than other people. It's actually not an objective dimension, but it can be subjective. Like, let's say during that, when my daughter comes to the crosswalk, they're going somewhere and there's a time limit. Well, she is on her way. She's in no rush because she's not stopping for no reason. Whereas now they perceive that they have lost time, and so they will have to rush to where they were going rather than being stress-free, relaxed to get to where they're going. They are now anxious and feeling behind. Carlos says too, and this is a thing, new levels bring new devils, but it's not necessarily true that those devils weren't there before. You just can perceive them. And when he goes into the matter of inorganic beings, which are conscious beings that are not human and we may not perceive. And he talks about, in the older books, haven't seen things like that. And I've experienced a thing like that. I don't know if you've know who the Hat Man is, but I was working for a guy or with a guy, and I was staying at his house in one of his rooms. And one morning I wake up because I feel like somebody. You ever have that feeling somebody's looking at you? I wake up and I see a shadow of a man with a large brimmed cap and like very wide shoulders, and it's about from the bottom of his chest up, like he's crouched down next to my bed, and we're face to face. And I take a couple swings at him, throw like a left right swing at him from my lying position, and I hit nothing. So I kind of blink and open my eyes, and there's nothing there. And could say I was dreaming, but I practiced lucid dreaming, so I was pretty sure I wasn't dreaming. And so for about 2 weeks, this was on my mind. Um, and so I looked up, shadow, bedroom, large brimmed hat, um, no features. And I find that there's this being called the Shadow Man that people all over the world see. Had a large brimmed hat, very wide shoulders. I couldn't tell if he was wearing the coat that everybody says he's wearing because it was just from the chest up, like he was squatted down next to me. And so that's an example of when your perception is open, you can see other things. And this is a thing that's probably there all the time that people are just too fixated on their matrix to be able to see outside of. So I guess you could say, too, that's a bit of a warning when you begin to open up your perception, and this may be why people are afraid to do it, is they begin to see things outside of normal perception. But not only inorganic beings, but it becomes harder to trick you and to manipulate you in that you notice when you have the energy and you're not distracted, because distractions sap your energy. Your brain can only process so much. Your body can only do so much. So when you're cutting out all of these distractions, you can be more focused on the things going on in front of you. And so you notice things about people. You notice their patterns. You notice, say, their body language. You notice their tone. You notice how their energy changes according to who's around or what the conversation is. And you become more clear about what's going on in the world around you. But more importantly than that, you are able to keep what you are trying to achieve in mind. And that's, the benefit of seeing like how people are acting and the energies how the energies around you are acting. Again, a lot of this stuff that goes on in the world serves to distract you from your focus, and you can be pulled away. But when you are saving your energy, you are able to maintain focus on your thing, whatever it is you're trying to create. Carlos says that the mark of a warrior is a serene state and chocked full of energy. And I read that after I was at Bigfoot 200. I paced a guy, Tommy Silva. You can watch an older video of this. I paced Tommy Silva for the Bigfoot 200. I paced 94 miles. And through that entire thing, I was serene and energetic. And if you watch the video, there's a lot that goes on at these events that can distract you and take your energy away. Even people on your own team or whose team you are on. And to maintain your energy can keep you chocked full of energy and serene. So I was happy to see that I am making progress in this direction. Carlos goes into like the example too of how like your energy is like how much money you have in the bank. And according to your parents, you are born with a certain amount of money in your bank. He gives the example of $1 million more or less. And from the outset as a baby, your energetic account is being taxed. And so there's energy going to this and energy going to that and energy going to that. And the amount of energy you have is being depleted, and you get used to that. And so you get used to having this depleted amount of energy. And the idea for us as warriors is to take that back, build that account up, become energetic millionaires again, so to speak. And he asks, or he says, like, do you do you die having been depleted entirely with no energy whatsoever to cross over into the next world, or do you go there with with your $1 million, or say having invested and made even more? And before you go into trying to tell me anything about like what happens after death, Carlos explains this too, but I also feel this way, that death is a strictly personal experience. There is no one in this world who can tell you what's going to be like when you pass away, when you die. So he says the sorcerers are able to like deflect the perceptual forces of others, and that to learn to be able to walk alone, one must walk alone. That isn't to say that you aren't in society. That's just to say that you are in society focused on what you are getting at and not getting tangled up in the energetic fields of anyone else. And he goes on to say, and we all know this, show me the 5 people you hang out with and I'll show you who you are. And it is that the 5 people you hang out with are affecting your energy and dictating who you are. And this is something that I'm learning. Not every exchange, not every relationship is valuable. Not every relationship is an investment. Most relationships are a cost. They deplete you, they drain you. Whereas there are relationships out there to be sought where it's an investment and it gives you energy and makes you feel abundant. And I guess kind of going back to like traditions and habits, Carlos talks about sex and having kids and how those kids are a product of your energy. And so if you have dull, boring sex, you will have dull, boring kids, you'll have a dull, boring life. But it's not just about sex, it's about any creation. If you go into it dull, boring, and low energy, you're going to have dull, boring, and low energy results. And the issue of children, as far as Carlos Castaneda talks about, it puts a lot of people off because he says you have to save your energy. And this is actually the best way to give your children the best life that they can, because when you're not so tangled up in their energy, you actually allow them to be more free, to express themselves more freely. And through not being so tightly wound about your children, that allows you to express yourself, and that allows you to focus on what you're getting at, and that allows your creations to be far more powerful, which in the end benefits both you and them. And then their creations have more focus and more power and less interference from the outside world. Because when we interfere like we do, we teach them that interference is what is natural and needed. And Carlos says the only chance that children have is to abandon their mother and father. And he says the only chance that we humans have, or we parents have, is to abandon our children. And I don't think this is meant like a true way. It's like a metaphorical way. Because, of course, like when you're a child, you need your parents, right? But you also, if you're going to be as powerful as you can be and create powerful things in your life, you have to be able to be like, cut your parents off, cut that energy off. Don't let them have access to everything about you. Talks about a sexual situation where Don Juan was fooled by his teacher, in that Don Juan used to crawl into bed with every woman that made herself available to him, and his teacher tricked him and got into bed with him, and they got all hot and steamy, and then the teacher revealed that he was not a woman at all, and this broke Don Juan's habit of crawling into bed with any woman that would have him. And Carlos himself he was in a similar situation where he met a woman and they were in their car and they were steaming up the windows with their hugs and kisses. And then he realized that this was not a woman but a man. and this put him off. And even that didn't put him off entirely. What put him off eventually was that Don Juan told him that he had to overcome his sexual tendencies in order to continue learning. I get this one, man, because I am a horn dog, and I have always been a horn dog, and someone who would jump into bed with almost anyone who would make themselves available to that. And I wasted a lot of energy on that, and that is not something I do anymore. Recently, too, I was attempting the dating world, and then I just kind of realized, like, I'm tired of that. It's been, I have, all my kids are grown. So going into, let's say you're not trying to have kids, but you do want to have sexual partners, Carlos goes into how you have to be careful who your sexual partners are, because sex isn't a game. Though it can be fun, it shouldn't be just for fun. And you have to be so careful in having kids. So let's say you want to have sex, but you don't want to have kids. You have to be having sex as a matter of creation. And you have to be careful not to waste your energy on just casual sex. And so I think this goes into like sex magic, the ability to manifest. So rather than wasting your sexual energy on just a fling, sexual magic is when you put a vision in your head at climax, and that will give you more powerful focus and more powerful manifestation. But also not hooking up with people who try and deplete your power, or people who are trying to like feed off you, say emotional vampires, or they're just trying to feel good, and people who are also out to create. And how sex, for the most part, creates bonds that restrict our freedom rather than liberate us. So being more careful and finding partners that are out for their own personal liberation and who can contribute to your liberation. And I know we've all been taught to like be empathetic and like give our energy out to others almost freely. But he says sorcerers are greedy with their energy. And what will happen when you begin to be greedy with your energy is you will notice things. And not just say mystical things like, say, the Hat Man, but you'll notice how your personal power grows. Your finances will grow. Your ability to operate in groups will grow. Your abilities to convince others to your cause will grow. And your ability to stay out of societal traps or even personal traps will grow. And so that makes the sorcerer even more greedy, because he understands the power that comes from conserving his energy. So when you begin to practice saving your energy and maintaining your focus, people around you may begin to try to paint you as, say, cold or unempathetic, ununderstanding, but nothing is further from the truth. When you begin to conserve your energy and build your energy, you have even more passion, you have even more power, you understand even more clearly because you see clearly. And you can break away from all those silly and petty arguments that have no base in reality. Once again, I'm Coach Brian with Northwest Elite Spirit, the channel you come to train your mind, body, and spirit. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do that now. Make sure to hit the notification button to stay up to date on all of my newest releases. I release content on training the mind, the body, and the spirit, and it's all tied together in the end. If you like this video, give it a like. If you have something to add to it, comment below. Share with like-minded individuals or people you think this stuff can help out. And as always, practice. Thank you.